The Ontario Board of Education is now called to order. We have a tobacco policy in place. There is no smoking within 100 feet of any school building. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. District Clerk, can you please take roll call?
Trustee Sherry?
Present.
Trustee Bishop?
Present.
Trustee Story?
Here.
Trustee Wallace? Trustee Raimondo?
Here.
Trustee Hemingway Lynch?
Here.
Trustee Taylor?
Here.
Thank you.
The board is going to enter into executive session to discuss tenure for specific employees and to meet with our attorney. May I have a first, please? Trustee Bishop, second Trustee Story. Questions or comments? Okay, all in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. We should be back in about I'd like to make a motion to exit executive session and return to public session. May I have a first, please? Trustee Lynch, second, Trustee Bishop. Questions or comments? All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. We'd like to welcome Principal Scott Richards.
Testing. Okay. So good evening and welcome to Woodstock. My name is Scott Richards. I'm the principal here at the Woodstock Elementary School. My welcome today is going to be fairly short. I've got two things to share with you, and the first one is a little bit about our third grade bridge unit. This was just completed by our third grade students. This was a unit that we developed, I believe, about 4 years ago, and it's one of those units that we continue to kind of work on and improve year after year. In this unit, students took a look at different shapes, designs. They looked at arches, triangles, trusses, and they were kind of challenged with the idea of incorporating those design features into a bridge structure that supports weight. The first part of the unit was started off by creating paper bridges. And that lesson was taken from a mystery science unit, which is an online science curriculum that has some really amazing online hands-on resources. Students learned about the engineering process. They actually took their projects to the point of failure, to the point that they would then have to work on trying to figure out how to improve their design and make their design stronger and better. And they also took a look at the famous Tacoma Narrows Bridge collapse and kind of took a look at what may have caused that collapse, what design flaws were there, and how they could maybe avoid similar mistakes in their own designs. These two pictures show very clearly that in the engineering units you get very different designs. The two boys on the right, I do believe they built the strongest bridge in the class, and I do have a short video that demonstrates how strong that bridge actually was. And here are a few more third graders and their designs. And the way we tested the strength of the bridges is that we placed a cup and hung it off of the bridge, and then we slowly filled the cup with pennies. In the video you're going to see, I believe they got up to like 230 pennies in the cup, so it really, really held up. So we'll give you a quick look at that.
190. Oh, Kelly. Oh, Julian, they're coming for you.
220 is the record.
Yeah. They may need a second cup. And their bridge isn't even sound. The cup is what the stick is. It is a little bit. And the stick fell out. Where are we at? What number? How much do you have, Ethan? Almost, it's going to be 199.
That's going to be
200. 20 more.
That's a 200. One,
What was ours for?
You can see they're really excited. Classmates.
4, 5,
Can you just give me one more so we can actually try?
7.
We're going past you guys. 190. Oh, Kelly. Oh, Julian, they're coming.
What I really like about the engineering units is sometimes they're not always your highest academic students who really succeed in the engineering units. Their brains kind of work a little bit differently, and it's one of my favorite units. So I'm glad to see that we continue to do it and that we continue to build on it. We've had teachers who've gone down to Hudson and visited the bridge down there and taken some knowledge from that bridge, brought it into this unit as well. So I think that's really great. My last piece for my welcome is I figured I would give you a quick update on the SEL, the 4 R's curriculum. This is something that the board has supported for a number of years. We were kind of ahead of the curve with this, and coming out of the pandemic, I think it's kind of important to get a teacher's perspective on how this curriculum does impact their students. So this is a short clip from Molly Heakin. She was interviewed, asked a few questions, and hopefully you'll enjoy.
So Molly, let me ask you, you were just talking about how 4Rs has changed your classroom. Did I capture that correctly?
Well, it's the change over the 3 years of the kids having had it. So the group I have now has had it since kindergarten. So K1, 2, this is their 3rd year with it. And they, the first year it's all stagnant. The circle time is awkward and embarrassing, and kids passing the talking piece. And this year is like right away, sharing and feelings and just a more depth of thought that I have never seen before in my 11 years of 2nd grade. So it's very cool. Very cool.
That is cool. And I know that you do this on a weekly basis, so there's a consistency. Can I ask you also, what about, so that's 4Rs, SEL, and the work you do around equity as well, I know. How about in the rest of your academic day? Do you see anything?
The listening piece that's it. The kids listen to each other now. They're practicing listening during 4Rs time, and it's this really special time to them. So they're really invested in listening to each other during that time, and then using similar language. It's group time. We're together. We're listening to each other. We're doing math talk and social studies talk and reading talk, and they really are talking more, sharing more ideas, and listening to each other all throughout the academic areas as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd want to add to that, or anything else that I haven't asked you that?
I mean, yeah, I could talk about it forever. I think, it sets up a template for, there's trust earlier in the year. So working through problems happens easier, more quickly earlier in the year. That's a really big deal. We can hash problems out with everybody in the room, unless it's a very private thing, because the kids are okay with talking about each other's stuff. And we know we all have differences and different experiences. So a bigger understanding of what it means to be a human, which is very, it changes the whole community in the classroom.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure working with you always.
Yes, you as well.
So I just thought it'd be nice of you to get kind of the teacher perspective of what we're doing here at Woodstock and throughout the district, and hopefully have a great rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Does anyone have questions for Principal Richards? No? All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Richards. Ms. Crandell, would you like to give an update?
Hello. Recently in the high school student government, in regards to our outside initiative, we have been very busy planning a planting day. We are hoping for Memorial Day weekend, but dates are still tentative, and I'll keep you posted. Tomorrow we are planning on meeting with the 6th grade student government and attending their Pink Shirt Day. Throughout the high school, Harvard Model Congress had a successful conference, and Ari Green received a Best Delegate Award. Congratulations, Ari. James Lynch will be representing Onteora at the upcoming DECA conference. Prom invitations were delivered to each senior. The senior class officers are holding a virtual meeting tomorrow evening with the senior class. The production of Chicago is coming along beautifully, and they have begun building their sets. Emma Katz is hosting a weekly indoor field hockey clinic for grades 7th through 12th for any level of player, which will be every Tuesday, and spring sports start next Monday, the 13th. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Crandell. Does anyone have questions for Ms. Crandell? No, well, feel free to leave when you need to. Thank you. And the Assistant Superintendent for Business, Ms. LeClaire, will present the 23-24 budget update.
I think they were trying to tell me something. So here we are, an update where we stand with the 23-24 budget. So our tax levy limit calculation has been submitted to the comptroller, As I mentioned last time, the maximum allowable tax levy for 23-24 is $47,892,141, which represents a 3.88% increase over the current year. However, in reflecting on what the board had asked about doing a 2% tax levy increase for revenue, what we have here is our draft 3 projected revenues. So we are looking at an approximate projected revenue of a little over $58 million, which represents an $837,340 increase, or just under 1.5%. So our expenses, you will notice, does look a little different than it did last time. Decrease in general support, the same increase in operation and maintenance, and the increase in instruction has dropped, and I will go into why later. Transportation, we see an increase. We are looking at increased contract costs next year, as well as salary increases. Employee benefits, not a surprise. Health insurance is still our #1 driver in employee benefits. Community service, that's the money that we give the libraries every year. Debt service is the debt that we are currently paying on the energy performance contract. That is currently the only debt that the district has. We are very lucky that we do not carry much debt. And then our interfund transfers, we are looking to reduce that a little next year over this year, current year. So what the changes were is, as I mentioned, we did reduce the tax levy to a 2%, which is well below the cap, which is 3.88%. We did have a slight increase in the health insurance retirement, and that is because we did have a number of retirees, and Assistant Superintendent Laffin and I did meet with many of the principals, and we were able to adjust the budget with not replacing many of those retirees, with absolutely no impact to programs or instruction. So I have to thank the principals for being very thoughtful in what they could do, knowing that we were looking to do only a 2% tax levy. So our gap is at about 3.1 million. So the suggestion is to just go ahead and use that as our appropriated fund balance, understanding that it is higher than the current year, but it is not as high as we have used in previous years. And knowing that we are looking at consolidating resources moving forward, I see that we can very easily reduce that in future years, our reliance on fund balance. So what's left? We still don't have the final health insurance rates. I'm confident that we budgeted enough, but it's always difficult to say. We are still waiting on the final state budget. Historically, the state budget has been a lot more than the governor's budget. The last few years, the governor has actually given schools more money, so the legislature kind of finagles it a little bit, but it doesn't usually end up being that much more. But I don't believe it's ever been less. And so my recommendation would be that any minor changes in the numbers, we would just adjust appropriated fund balance so that way we can keep the 2% tax levy increase. So moving forward, what you're going to see is your Proposition 1 will be the budget. So the board will approve that in April. The superintendent and I will present our recommended budget with a little more detail, and then the board will approve, and that will be the first proposition on the ballot. As I mentioned the last time, we are looking at a couple other propositions. The second one being the use of the current capital reserve. So there is currently $8.8 million in there. I did have a conversation with them today. They haven't quite, it's just, all I can say is right now, the numbers are all over the place. I mean, we are struggling with trying to come up with numbers that are real because inflation is killing us. Costs are really kind of out of control, so they want to be very mindful in the dollar amount they give us. Their recommendation is the proposition that will be put on the vote is an up to. It's a maximum. We have 8.8 million. We can say up to 8.8 million, knowing that this is money that we have in our savings. This is not going to affect the taxes because it's already been put aside for this purpose. And this way we can really devote the time and energy on doing the work that we want to do and not have to worry about cutting things out because the bids have come in too high, which unfortunately we have done almost every single time that we have put a project out to bid these last couple of years. So as I said, it includes renovating up to 10 additional classrooms. It has the roof repair. It has the electrical upgrades. It has updating the middle school gymnasium, installing canopies over the cafeteria and the loading dock entrance, as well as the potential electric bus infrastructure. So in order for this to be on the vote, on the ballot, it needs to be approved by the board at the March 21st board meeting. The other proposition we were looking to include is funding a new capital reserve. This would be a capital reserve that would allow us to fund for the long-term capital plan, whatever that might be. And we would ask the voters to approve us to save $10 million up to 10 years. So this would not be additional money. This would be basically savings. The money at the end of the year, for whatever reason, some students moved out, a teacher retired mid-year that we didn't have to replace, would be money that we thought we would have to spend that we don't have to spend. We would then save it, put it aside in this capital reserve, and that would be earmarked specifically for work that needed to be done in the future. This way it allows us to save money to fund those future projects, so there is no additional cost to the taxpayers. And again, this also needs to be approved by the Board of Ed at the next board meeting in order for it to be on the ballot in May. So just kind of next steps. March 21st board meeting, we will go through a detailed budget. We will ask the board to approve those propositions for the capital reserve, for using the capital reserve and for doing a new capital reserve. April 11th, the superintendent recommended budget. April 18th, the board will adopt the budget. We will also approve the property tax report card. That's what will show that we are asking for a tax levy of 2%. And we'll also be voting on the BOCES administrative budget that night. Then on May 2nd, we have the budget hearing. And then May 18th, we have the budget vote. It's amazing, it goes so fast. And that's basically it. So anybody have any questions?
Trustee Lynch.
Thank you so much. 2 questions about proposition number 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I take your point, and I understand the part about the use of up to $8.8 million. I was just curious: is there a current estimate of what that would cost?
8.1.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so and does that include some of the changes that Mr. Dodona had talked about the last meeting about that he would want?
Yep. So some of it's included in here, and some of it's included in that $500,000 transfer to capital. That's actually inside the budget.
Right.
So it's located in both those places.
In both places. Okay. Okay. And then if there was now moving to proposition 3, if there is a new capital reserve fund approved, we would start basically, right, 2023, 24
Correct.
at zero.
At zero, correct.
And we would just start moving that money in.
Correct.
Throughout the year.
Yes, and then the voters would also have to approve for us to spend that money on any projects.
Okay.
So the voters approve to put it in, and then the voters have to approve to take it out.
To take it out. Okay. Are there any concerns from in terms of your experience and your career in this space of having zero capital going into 23, 24, recognizing that we want to spend upwards of $8 million in the original reserve?
Only because it takes so long. I mean, that $8 million is going to be sitting in the bank for 2 years at least.
Okay.
Probably longer, because once it's approved, it doesn't mean it has to be done right away. So we could decide, depending on what happens, okay, yes, the voters approved 8.8, but you know what, we're going to hold off on this one piece, but we're going to do this other piece. The bus infrastructure is a perfect example.
Okay.
We don't know when we'll be able to do that, but we know we have to do it, so at least if we get the voters to approve it now, then the funding's available whenever we're ready to do it, and we don't have to go back out to the voters.
Makes sense. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for Ms. LeClaire? I just want to thank you. I know that it's a tremendous amount of work to take the budget from where it was at 3.88 and bring it down to 2%. And I think the board recognizes the financial struggle of our families in the district, and we really appreciate the effort that you and your team put into bringing us a budget that we can feel more comfortable putting out to the voters. So
Thank you.
Thank you for
And
that.
then just as a side note, we will be presenting the budget to the various towns as well. Next week we have Olive on Monday and Woodstock on Tuesday. So if anyone out there and wherever the camera is, camera world, would like to see those presentations, that's where we'll be. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, item 6.01, the Board of Education hereby accepts the minutes of February 21st, 2023. May I have a first, please? Trustee Taylor, second Trustee Bishop. Questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Did I skip a page? Yeah. Okay, the superintendent will report district news.
Thank you. Good evening. As Assistant Superintendent LeClaire just noted, we will begin presenting our preliminary budget to the town boards next week. It is a little bit early in the budget process, but given the work that the board is also doing towards the long-term plan, it is better to have dialogue whenever possible. And I would imagine that at this point, the budget is not going to change substantially as we move forward, so it's better to speak to the towns now. And if needed, we can always return for a follow-up. We met with Kyle Buser from the Department of Transportation to talk to him about the path that will be created to link the crosswalk that we have to the new access for the rail trail. And I think each board member has this, as well as it was out with the agendas. I asked him to provide us with a simplified rendering that we can share. We can also potentially put it on our website. And he offered to come and speak to the board if there was an interest in having that discussion. He did note that the budget for this project is limited and there really is not room for modifications to be made. But we appreciate his willingness to come out and walk the site and speak with us and share the plans in a way that is more easily understood than the engineering documents he originally provided, which were about 800 pages long and did not look like that at all. I had the pleasure of being at the New York State Council of School Superintendents Conference this week, and I attended a session regarding the requirement for electric buses, as that is very much on our minds. And the presenters included the head of the Office of Facilities Planning, and even though the requirement is already in legislation, the information that we were given yesterday is that a guidebook is being created for districts and it will be distributed to help us navigate the process. But it appears the guidebook is still very much unfinished, as they indicated they would release it one section at a time as each section is completed, and they are not yet ready to give us anything. And just in terms of, purchasing backlogs and supply chain issues, in conversation with one of my colleagues from a district near Syracuse, he explained to me that they put in their budget last year just to try and see how it would work. They put in their budget for one electric bus, which they then promptly ordered, which has not yet been received. And there is no delivery in sight. So I think this will be an ongoing discussion. Just as a follow-up on the board discussion regarding Regents grading and a possible hold harmless resolution consideration, Principal Edelman did review the situation and the issue fully with his full faculty this week, and is going back to his building liaisons on the 13th, and will be prepared to provide final feedback to the board, so that we would anticipate this could be on the agenda for the next board meeting, so that we make sure to follow up in a timely fashion. Following a very helpful suggestion from Trustee Lynch, we have added Mr. Dodana's board presentation to the long-term planning page of our website, as well as the deeds for both the Woodstock and Phoenicia properties, so that everybody can have access to that information. And now I would like to invite Assistant Superintendent Laffin to provide an update regarding the integration of 6th grade into the middle school. And then following that, Assistant Superintendent LeClaire is going to share some additional information regarding a meeting she had today with our architect.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. The building and district level administration continue to work with the 6th grade and middle school staff as we begin the planning, the process for September 2024. On Monday, February 27th, Mr. Bono, Mr. Didana, and I met with the 6th grade team for continued conversations about transition and planning. We discussed that this will be an iterative process where we listen to their concerns and ideas, allow some time to plan and work on tasks and ideas, and then come back together for updates and adjustments as necessary. Mr. Didana shared that the middle school staff is excited to welcome the 6th grade staff and students to the building. The meeting was a very positive one with an overall feeling of excitement for the upcoming process and the shift, and we plan to meet again with them in April. In addition, today's middle school faculty meeting centered around the transition, including 6th grade. Mr. Didana continues to partner with the faculty to dream big and develop exciting opportunities for the 6th grade students while maintaining a developmentally appropriate separation and unique identity apart from the high school students. And I'll continue to provide updates as we move forward.
So this afternoon, we had some of our architects and engineers from CPL come in district, and we discussed a 27.9 acre property that's currently for sale off 28. It's kind of near the Olive Firehouse. So Victoria personally reached out to the owners to gauge their interest in selling it, and quickly gave permission for them to speak to our engineers, which was great. So we could check to see if the viability of the land as a potential site for a transportation garage. So he is going to be walking the site with Kyle. He was supposed to do it last week, but then it snowed. We do have an aerial photo that he was able to use that showed kind of the grade lines and things like that. And he really thinks it shows a lot of promise, that not only could we house a transportation garage, that we could also then lease to our contractor. So our contractor would be operating transportation on our site, so then we can put the charging stations there and not worry about anybody else owning them. We would own them. We could also house the buildings and grounds vehicles, their equipment and their supplies such as salt. That would then take it away from the high school, and then we could potentially use that area that's currently our bus garage as parking. And then he said that there was also enough land that could house additional sports fields, and that also just so happens that CPL is also working with the town of Olive. So we could look at partnering with the town of Olive for any potential spaces that they need or facilities that they need and do an intermunicipal agreement, and thereby we're both kind of using a brand new facility. So we're going to continue conversations with the town, continue conversations with CPL. They also mentioned that Monticello just did a very similar transportation garage that we're looking to do. So we're looking to kind of do a little field trip. So if any board member might be interested, we might take some of the facilities members with us. And so one of the questions was, as we had talked about potentially purchasing other properties, that it does need to be voter approved. It might make sense to put that as another proposition for the budget vote on the ballot. So it's currently on the market for $795,000. Talking to Victoria, we thought we'd reach out to SED since ARP money is, the deadline is fast approaching, and they want us to spend the money. It's just with the backlog of capital projects, it's just very difficult. So we thought it's at least worth a conversation to see if they would be willing to allow us to use ARP money, that's the American Rescue Plan, the COVID relief money, to purchase this property. If not, we have other options. We could use our unappropriated fund balance, which currently sits at almost 2.4 million. So we have plenty of options as far as funding. So obviously the timeline would be tight if we put it on this ballot, but I will diligently work and bring back more information at the next meeting.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent LeClaire. I would just add to that the Olive Fire Department is very interested in our electric bus situation and has a lot of concerns. And actually, they had mentioned that property as potentially being very ideal because of the proximity to the new firehouse. They have a lot of concerns, and I know that you've been working very closely with them, and I appreciate you making that connection and collaborating with them. This is all new territory for a lot of our fire departments, and they're very interested in making sure that they handle it appropriately. So thank you for working with them so closely. Does anyone have questions for Ms. LeClaire? Trustee Story?
To get it on to be voted on by the public for this year, what is the date the board would have to go by this?
April 1st.
April 1st, okay.
Trustee Lynch?
Yeah, along those same lines, just help me understand either the ARP option or the unappropriated fund balance option could be done without voter approval because we already have that funding, or no matter. Right.
The voters are just approving the purchase.
Right.
How it's funded is really
Is
up
our
to the board, the
existing
district. Yeah.
funding.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay.
They would only need to approve if we were borrowing, and we're not looking to borrow.
Any other questions for Ms. LeClaire? No. Thank you, Ms. LeClaire, Ms. Laffin, Victoria, Superintendent McLaren, sorry. Is there anyone else who's got questions for the superintendent or the assistant superintendents? No? All right, moving forward. Does the board have any district news? Anyone on the board want to report district news? No? Nobody? All right. All right, we're going to hear from the ad hoc committee. For those who are joining us, the ad hoc committee is comprised of Trustee Bishop, Trustee Story, Trustee Raimondo, Superintendent McLaren, Assistant Superintendent Laffin, Assistant Superintendent Allison, and Assistant Superintendent LeClaire. They are doing a tremendous amount of work to make sure that we are moving forward with reconfiguration in the absolute best way possible. So Trustee Bishop, I think, is going to report out.
Thank you. Thank you for reading off all those names. Now I don't have to. So all of those people met on February 21st for about 2 hours to discuss future World Cafes and forums, community forums, and to make final preparations for our February 28th virtual World Cafe. The February 28th cafe was well attended, and Assistant Superintendent Laffin did an amazing job of presenting and navigating the technology required to provide participants with virtual breakout rooms and breaks. And Assistant Superintendent Allison shifted attendees to their assigned groups as needed, like working magic, and supported everyone who was unfamiliar with Zoom meetings. They did a great job. Each of the 7 table groups met for 40 minutes to discuss questions and the data provided and reported out to the whole group as a culminating activity. The full board has received a copy of the PowerPoint presentation from that night and the handouts that were requested by community members after the first World Cafe, and questions for their consideration. As a means of informing the full community of our progress, I'm just going to read a little bit from the PowerPoint presentation from that night and just list off the handouts as well as the questions that the 7 teams considered. Our next World Cafe will be in person and is scheduled for March 27th with a snow date of the 29th. And our virtual community forum will be held on March 30th, and a Zoom link will be provided to the entire Onteora community. So just bear with me as I leaf through this. I didn't mark pages. So basically, the virtual forum started with just reviewing the itinerary. Assistant Superintendent Laffin went over the cafe norms, which the participants were familiar with already. She reviewed what a cafe is, and I will just read that off. It's a collaborative setting that encourages and promotes a focused conversation, values and honors the perspective that each participant brings to the conversation, allows for an exchange of thoughts and ideas through conversation, and promotes thought and reflection as a result of the conversation. And so the process that we used in the virtual forum was very similar to the one that we used in the first in-person forum. We have groups, for the most part, they're groups of 5 community members, and they represent parents from each of the schools, government officials, business owners, and just a nice group of community members. As a group, they discuss each of the questions that are presented to them. There's a table host, and the table host and other designated recorders write down key ideas, themes, and parking lot topics on their own paper or this was a virtual, so they either took notes on paper or using their computers and made sure that those notes got back to Assistant Superintendent Laffin. At the end of the time that they had to discuss, like I said, we all got back together and they reported out as each table leader. I'm not going to review the host responsibilities. We did use feedback from the January 31st World Cafe to inform the topics and address handouts. And the participants on January 31st did request more information, which we did provide. So they requested additional information on how enrollment projections are calculated. They wanted to see the transportation route maps by building. They were interested in the total number of students, kindergarten through 6th, who are attending each school by town, the number of homeschooled and parentally placed students over 7 years. So students, parentally placed students for the purpose of that work were students who are placed in private schools by their parents. And we use the example of Woodstock Day School as one of the schools that students can attend privately. And they also wanted to see the building statistics and class size regulations, which were all of those documents were provided to them. So we asked them to consider 2 things, but the second one has a lot of parts. So the first thing that they discussed and gave us feedback on was, what does the additional handout information make you wonder about the pros and cons of each scenario in the Bachman report? And the Bachman report, the scenarios that we were referring to was Dr. Bachman's scenario A, which would be to, let's see, we would keep Phoenicia and Woodstock open and close Bennett. The middle school would be a 6 through 8 school, and the high school would remain a 9 through 12. Scenario D is close Phoenicia and Woodstock. Bennett would be a K-5 building. The middle school would be 6 through 8, and the high school would be 9 through 12. And then scenario F would be to close Phoenicia or Woodstock, and there would be 2 K-5 buildings, including Bennett, and the middle school would be a 6 through 8 school, and the high school would be a 9 through 12. And then, so they had 15 minutes or more, actually, because we got through the first part really quickly. They had about 20 minutes to discuss that. And then the next thing that we asked them to do was to choose a few of these topics that came out of the first World Cafe. And so these were direct quotes from the feedback forms from the January 31st World Cafe. One was, there is concern for communities that might lose a school. Another, splitting communities can hurt some communities, like the community of Olive. Another, consolidating can bring the community together. Another was, children being together from kindergarten reduces tension among students. Another was, there is a need for equity for students from both sides of the district. Another was, we need to balance schools' numbers and have a more equitable use of facilities. Another was, how do we transfer positive elements to all kids, staff, and families? And the final one was, should the district be seen as one of the communities? And so the table groups met to discuss all of, as many of those issues as they wanted to or felt comfortable with in the time allotted. And then at the end, each table leader was able to give feedback to us, to the whole group, not us, but to the entire group. And the ad hoc committee is basically there just to listen. We do not participate. And that's my report. Sorry it was long.
I just wanted to note the Zoom link for the community forum is actually embedded in the long-term planning page where people have accessed the survey. The Zoom link is a hot link at the bottom of that page. So we will certainly get it out and publicize it more as the date comes closer, but it is already out there on our webpage.
Thank you, Trustee Bishop. That you guys are doing fantastic work and you're doing really hard work. And it's really difficult to take all of these scenarios, bring people together, and have these hard conversations. So, I appreciate the time, energy, and, kind of emotional wherewithal that it takes to put this all together. So thank you on behalf of all of us. And I look forward to the conversation on the 30th, where the entire community is welcome to join us for a Zoom discussion. And that link is on the website, but has also been posted numerous times on social media. And a reminder to everyone that you have until March 10th to complete the community survey. I don't know what the response rate has been on that, but I think it's been pretty good.
It's been incredible, and we're really very appreciative.
Yeah, and I would just remind all board members that if you're comfortable doing so, please continue to share that link on your social media. We want to reach as many people as we possibly can to try to get as much community conversation going around this as possible. We are going to move this into item 9.01 for discussion. And I assume that we have some discussion. Does anybody have questions? Let's put it this way. Does anyone have questions for the ad hoc committee? Trustee Lynch.
Thank you, Trustee Sherry. A comment first and then a question. I just want to say, again, thank you so much to the ad hoc committee, both staff and board members and trustees who've been spending so much of your time to lead this effort. And I guess a comment in that, as a trustee who's absorbing all of the information, it just feels a bit passive, right? And it feels like you're out doing so much of the work. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you and ask for some more questions, because the timeline is quick, and I think it's important. I think also for the community to recognize that in the conversations that we had about the board goals, which were just developed in October, and then this formation of this ad hoc committee, we've reiterated that this is going to be a very long process, and it will take years. And I think that it's important to recognize that those years are actually what it will take years to implement it. But what has changed in some ways is that the decision, right, is actually the vote will happen in April 18th. And so I think everybody needs to hear that again, because I think that's really important that we give this ad hoc committee all the information and ideas and questions and input from these surveys as possible, because we are asking them to do a lot of work in a very short period of time. And that the implementation of it will, of course, take much longer. But it's important that all voices, I think, are heard at this point. And I really, again, commend you for what you've done to include so many people and so many voices. But I have a couple questions. And again, they may not be, you might not be able to answer them right now, and that's fine. I guess maybe just, I can always add them at the end of an RFI or whatever is appropriate. But I think it would just be helpful for me to better understand what is the format, I guess, first, of the long-term plan, and then what will be in the content. So from a format perspective, are we expected to get the information orally, in a presentation? Will it be a PowerPoint? Will it be a 20-page paper? What is it that we'll need to absorb when we talk about being able to see the long-term plan, just in terms of format, before we go into content?
Just before Superintendent McLaren responds, the way that I see it is that, like we had said before, to be able to determine what the plan is and have the board's approval on it is kind of giving us permission to start planning it and start really developing the plan and then envisioning the implementation of the plan. I think that a good example of that is almost the conversation about that piece of property for the transportation department and the place for the charging stations and all of that. It's sort of like that's how it's going to kind of unfold as we go into the planning process. I don't know if that's a good explanation, but I don't know if you want to add anything.
I guess from my perspective, I would imagine that the ad hoc committee would bring possibly a PowerPoint kind of pulling together all of the feedback that we have received and present it to the board for a vote on what the structure will be as we move forward. I don't think that will be considered in and of itself the entire long-term plan, because once we have the structure, then we can continue on with the implementation, which will include all of the planning for academics that we can then identify how everything will flow. It will allow us to identify how transportation is going to flow. There will be multiple layers that we can then build on to show how much more we can do for our students as we move forward. Yes.
I believe, Superintendent McLaren, our ad hoc committee will be presenting to the board on the April 11th, a culmination of all of our World Cafes community forum and the survey, in the hopes that the board will then take that information and help us choose which direction we're going to then build in terms of long-term planning.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe just one more question. Curious, looking at the survey myself and trying to register my preferences, and the other part of the survey is about thinking about what could be used for the buildings. It's a question to me, sort of a fundamental question, but will the district plan to sell these properties potentially if we choose either scenario or any of the scenarios of closing one of the schools, or would we be leasing them? Because it feels to me that would change what kind of control we have about what the property could be.
I don't think that has necessarily been determined yet. That will be up to the board. My personal preference would be not to sell them. I think it provides us with more flexibility if we were able to lease them moving forward. In the past, that has been a real issue when dealing with the state education department, because if you have space, they don't want you to add space to any other buildings. But in conversations that we have had with them, they seem willing to be much more flexible at this point, because it doesn't make even financial sense for the state to hold that line, because they will then end up providing more aid for a less efficient operation. So they seem much more willing to consider allowing us to maintain ownership. But that will be something that, that's not necessarily my decision to make at this point.
Just to also add, I think it also depends on what plan the board goes with, because for instance, as Superintendent McLaren had reported out at the last board meeting, a school like Bennett would be difficult for us for safety reasons to lease out or do anything with community property as it's on our campus. So a lot of that would have to be discussed in terms of what our decision is in terms of how we move forward.
Okay, thank you. And then just the last question, you had actually mentioned the budget meetings next week with the town supervisors. I know some of the town supervisors have been part of these World Cafes, but I was just wondering if the ad hoc committee would have time or capacity to meet with the planning boards of each town about potential building usage and their needs, or to better understand what the communities are thinking about if we were to have a building available in either the Shandaken or Woodstock towns.
I think certainly at the district level, we would be happy to meet with the towns. So we're actually, just to be clear, we're going to the town board meetings and presenting to the entire boards. But, as we move forward, we certainly want to partner with our towns no matter what the decision is.
Thank you.
Less of a question, more of a comment. In looking over in the handouts, some of the information about transportation, I think it's really an important part of this conversation. And being, I think, the 17th largest geographic district in New York State, we have a very complicated transportation system. And I think that it would benefit the community to really understand that, to see what we're kind of looking at in these handouts. I know that it's all available on the website, but I'm wondering if for our next board meeting we could either have Nicole come in or have someone do a presentation really focused on transportation, including the cost savings and what it would look like if we were to change transportation routes. What are the benefits to the districts? What are the pros and the cons? I know you have it, and I'm just wondering if we can. Okay.
We have that. We
Yeah.
will be able to present that to you guys. It's actually something we'll be addressing in our cafes and forums.
Actually, yeah, that's excellent. I think it would be really beneficial for the whole board to see that information and to really understand A, what it looks like currently, and B and C, what it would look like in the potential of any of the three of the comparisons, the three scenarios that we're looking at. I'd like to understand the transportation differences. I can read it, but I think seeing it would be really helpful. Does anybody else have questions for the ad hoc committee? Any other members of the ad hoc committee have something to add? No? Okay. So just a reminder to the community to please fill out that survey. I don't know what day it is, but we have a couple more days to get that done. And then to please mark on your calendars March 30th. We'd love to have as much participation as possible for the community-wide Zoom meeting. It has to be done by Friday, it's the 10th? Okay, so by Friday, the survey needs to be completed. Okay, item 9.02, a donation from the Bennett Elementary School PTA. The superintendent recommends the acceptance of a donation totaling $1,595 cash from the Bennett Elementary School PTA to be used for a music trip bus charter at Bennett Elementary School. The superintendent recommends approval to increase the 2022-2023 budget per the following donation. May I have first? Trustee Bishop, second Trustee Raimondo. Questions or comments? Thank you to the Bennett PTA for their incredible hard work in raising the funds and making sure that the kids have this awesome trip to look forward to. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, we're going to have a discussion about public be heard decorum. There have been a few times that this is an ongoing conversation, at least for as long as I've been on the board. What is public be heard? What is the purpose of public be heard? And what the board can do to support public be heard, but also to not be concerned during public be heard. There were a number of board members who approached me following our last board meeting, feeling unsafe, feeling uncomfortable with the tone and the kind of the way that the last board meeting went. Officer Sharon is with us because of that reason, and because we feel it's appropriate to make sure that everybody on the board feels comfortable and safe at all times. I know there are some people who feel strongly about this, and I know that there are some people who don't. So if anybody wants to talk about it, this is the time. No? All right, you guys. Trustee Lynch.
I'm just curious. Thank you, Trustee Sherry. And thank you, Deputy Tom. I'm just curious if there is a protocol or in place or anything that we should consider, maybe even if it's something the policy committee should take up. I mean, what would be helpful to ensure universally our safety or our perception of safety anyway? And I'm thinking about having, could it be standard that we have an officer at every meeting, for example?
So I would just say that over the last couple of years, as this conversation has evolved, there have been multiple discussions about public be heard versus freedom of speech. There are some board members over the last couple of years who have felt really strongly that public be heard should be open for any conversation that the public wants to have with their elected officials. And there are other board members who have felt just as strongly that what happens here should have something to do with education. We most recently revised our public be heard statement to recognize that this is not a place to promote commercial ventures. I think that across the country, school board meetings are becoming a little bit of a, a zone where there's a lot of information shared and there's a lot of personal feelings that are shared. There are, again, some board members who have strong feelings about this and others that don't. So I'm comfortable with the way that things are written now. I encourage the public to come and speak to us. I think that keeping it focused on education is, kind of what we were elected to do, but I recognize that there are other board members who don't feel the same way. So I would encourage my board members to speak up, because this is not a conversation that we should be having in private. This is a public conversation.
I don't really have anything to add. I'm just grateful that you brought up, it up and that you spoke very clearly about it. And I am grateful that that Deputy Tom is here tonight. Thank you.
Okay, so, Trustee Armando?
I think we come here generally all for the same reasons, which is for our children. And I think it's important as parents and caregivers and educators that we lead by example and how we treat others. So I know that I come here looking to be respectful and helpful and kind, even if I don't always agree. That's okay. We don't have to. We can agree to disagree sometimes. But to speak aggressively towards others, especially people you don't even know really, but who are here elected by you to make decisions that we feel are in our community's best interests at large, including children. It's just important to know that we're humans too, and that we have emotions, and that we go home at night and we have to process everything just like all of you have to process everything. So just be kind.
Thank you, Trustee Armando. Yeah, it's a difficult conversation to have, and I think it's difficult when you are an elected official to acknowledge that there may be times that you don't feel safe, or maybe times that you feel really uncomfortable, or that you are on the receiving end of constituents who are unhappy with decisions that you may or may not be making. And all of that is understandable and acceptable. I would encourage my colleagues to continue to have this conversation, but not just with me privately, because I received feedback from almost every board member after our last board meeting, and the feedback was to please have Officer Sharon join us at our meetings. And I appreciate that he's here, but it is outside of his normal hours of operation. So, I want to be mindful of that, and I think we need to continue to have this conversation. And we can have it in our next retreat, but it really is a conversation that we should be having with the public, because everyone who joins us needs to understand kind of what the parameters are, and if we need to modify the parameters, then that is absolutely a public conversation. Okay? Yeah, go ahead, Trustee Bishop.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with us taking a look at the policy again. We have a meeting coming up soon, and I think that's something that we should do.
I mean, I'm happy to have you guys take a look at the policy and see if there are any areas of improvement. It's a pretty straightforward policy. I know that former boards really wanted to modify it in a way that other board members felt restricted freedom of speech, and I'm one of those board members. I really believe that the public needs to be heard, and I know that Trustee Story agrees with me on that. So I would just ask you, when you're doing that, to keep that in mind. That we certainly want to encourage participation, but we brought in a table. At one point, the idea was that people would sit and that we would all kind of be on the same level and have a discussion. That was agreed upon, and then other board members felt like that was not appropriate. So we're still kind of figuring this out, and I think that Trustee Wallace needs to be part of this conversation as well. So we will continue to have it until we get to a place where everyone is comfortable. Anything else? Okay, item 9.04, the Board of Education approves any trustee to attend the Rural Schools Conference, NYSBA Convention, NYSBA Capital Conference, and any workshop trainings with all related expenses. May I have a first? Trustee Bishop, second Trustee Story. Questions or comments? Thank you to the board members who attend all of these conferences and do all of the extra work that is involved in the time and energy and time away from our families that is spent doing this. It is recognized and appreciated. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. The Board of Education approves the superintendent to attend the Rural Schools Conference, the NYSBA Convention, the NYSBA Capital Conference, NYSCUS, and any workshop trainings with all related expenses. May I have a first? Trustee Bishop, second Trustee Story. Questions or comments? Thank you to the superintendent for taking your weekends away from your family and your time away from your family to do this extra work. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. What do you guys want to do? Keep going? Anybody?
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, so we're gonna keep going. I'm gonna need that sheet, Amanda. Item 11.01, the board will acknowledge public be heard comments from the last meeting, Neil Brownell and Karen Inge. The board appreciates hearing from the public, including students, on any agenda or non-agenda item. Please understand that by our adopted parliamentary procedure, the board cannot engage in discussion or answer questions during public be heard. Please know that we hear you and take all of your comments into consideration. The board does reserve the right to correct any inaccuracies or misinformation during public be heard. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes, be civil, and do not name any particular individuals or promote any commercial products or ventures. People wishing to express individual student or personnel concerns can bring them to the superintendent's attention in private. Okay, Mr. Brownell.
Thank you. I was talking to my grandkids, and can you hear me? How's this? Is that better? I was talking to my grandkids, and I asked them what they were being taught about the environment. Are they being taught about the things that are going on in our world? Well, my 8-year-old grandson ran over to me, hugged me, and started crying, saying, "I do not want to die." My 13-year-old granddaughter stood up and said, "They're telling me that I have to stand up and tell the black kids that I am bad." Well, for God's sakes, our kids are scared every day, every second, because of what you are teaching them, the lies that you are teaching them. You're good people. You know that I've shown you many things that you're lying about, and now you're lying to our kids, and you're making them scared 24 hours a day. He was home, and he was crying. But no, you felt uncomfortable for a moment or two when I used a word. Whoa, God forbid you feel uncomfortable when you make our kids terribly uncomfortable at all times. And if you think, I told you before, that you're going to shut me up, it's not going to happen. If I have to get a hold of a constitutional lawyer, I will walk into this school with them. And trust me, there's plenty of them that would love to come in front of you guys. So do me a favor and start teaching our kids the truth. America is the greatest civilization that has ever existed. I will debate that with anyone. I will bring up anything that America has done wrong, as well as what America has done right. I will teach them the entire story, and then let them decide. They don't have to decide the way I decide, but we really should all be working with the same information. Because if we're not working with the same information, we're going to come down and have no way of us communicating of any kind. And the biggest point here is, I came in here to get you to hear me. Well, 2 weeks after I gave a speech, you're still talking about it. So obviously, you heard every word I had to say, and you knew damn well that you weren't in danger. That's ridiculous. Neil Brownell, the crazy inventor. God bless.
Megan Brenner.
Parents engaged now. We have concerns about the validity and accuracy of the data being used to support the reconfiguration plan, and we're requesting that the committee postpone the upcoming 418 vote until the numbers can be reevaluated. Our questions: what data are enrollment projections based on? We believe it needs to be reassessed using more accurate sources. From the looks of it, the data seems to be 2018 to 2019 data, which is stale now. What weight are you giving the survey and community forum as well as World Cafes? And how are they being evaluated and will they be reported out? And just so the public is aware, the survey is somewhat exclusive. It left out a very large audience, which includes future parents. What weight are you giving? So would a second round of World Cafe be considered to invite voices that were unable to register for the first? And also to give a more diversified representation. I understand that the same participants are being included in each of the World Cafes. What is the timeline for implementation of this reconfiguration plan? When do we expect to see proposed costs for capital project improvements, and how can the board make a decision before seeing those? The takeaways or our asks of you, since there are so many affected families who are not or are newly aware of this reconfiguration plan, what we're asking again is to, one, please delay the 418 vote until there is time to, two, reassess the numbers using current sources and methods. More time be given to conduct a proper survey of the district that takes into account new families that have moved here during the pandemic. Closing statement before I share a little bit about who I am. If these schools close, effectively goes with it young families, business owners, property owners, such as ourselves and countless others that chose to make these communities home. This will ultimately lower the tax rolls. A little bit about who I am in the remaining time I have left. I'm a new parent that bought here before the pandemic 6 years ago with the intentions of raising a family here. We moved in full-time 3 years ago. I'm a mother to 5-month-old twins and a 3-year-old, hence the bags under my eyes. I chose to stay here because of the proximity to Woodstock Elementary, as well as the vibrant community, quality of life, and simpler life. Over the last 2 years, we've really seen our communities swell. Our group, again, open, is made up of current and future parents, communities of preschools, daycares, religious groups, play groups, et cetera, and growing. And the more that we grow and learn, the more that we realize that this is an unknown issue to the wider community of local parents, most of whom are dissuaded by difficult access to the conversation. Thank you all so much. I'll email these questions. Of course, I understand you can't comment, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Brenner. I just want to clarify something. That survey is open to everyone. Everyone in this community should and can take that survey. It is available on the website. It is for everyone, future parents, former parents, people who never were parents. Anybody who wants to take that survey should and please do take the survey. And the postcard was mailed to every household in the Ontario School District as... Community member is the other. You are a member. If you are a member of the community, then you are a community member. So, okay. Well, I'd also would like to redirect for 1 minute so that a member of the ad hoc committee can provide an explanation of the World Cafe, because even though we've gone over it, there seems to be a little bit of misunderstanding of the World Cafe. We can do that now or we can do it after, but there is a reason that the people are consistently the same, and I want to make sure that we're really clear about that. Would the board like to handle that now or after? Amanda?
So in terms of the World Cafe, the World Cafe, the goal is to get a group of different stakeholder groups together to have diverse conversations. World Cafe participants were picked based on interest to a survey that every member of the community received a postcard with a QR code. There was emails that went out in terms of all of our staff and faculty. Then based on interest, the ad hoc committee tried to make a balanced forum that included and was not didn't have too many of different stakeholder groups, so that we had equal amounts of Phoenicia parents, community members, business, government, so that it was equal. We didn't look at anyone's position. It was just based on perspective. The reason that those groups stayed the same is that so that we could then also build a environment of trust and safety and discuss some very difficult situations. Again, though, that community forum could be as big as the amount of people that were interested in it. We had about, I think, we have 35 members that are part of that World Cafe, and that was pretty near to how many, I think we may have had 50 names that actually showed interest, but in order to make it balanced is why we had chosen that 35.
But I think also it's important to note that it stays the same people because each conversation builds on the last. And so the groups have conversation, have some time for reflection, have some questions, and then when they get those answers, then they have more in-depth conversation, more reflection, more requests for more information. So keeping those groups the same allows them to work through the process.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Brenner, I would encourage you to please send the questions in an email form so that we can all see it, and please copy the superintendent and the board clerk. Jason Glasser.
Oh, it's it's Glazer, but thank you. It's okay. I just want to start, and I don't know if this is going to cut into my time, but I think it's really rough that you guys have to walk away from meetings feeling unsafe. That's really not called for, or what this should be about. And I know that's a national issue, and I just want you to know I hear you, and that's insane that we have to have an armed officer here because we're worried about safety. So I'm really sorry you have to deal with that. One thought I had, I'm really coming in Johnny-come-lately a bit about these proposals. I'm here to discuss and make some points about the proposals being made about the rerouting of the schools and the classes. My background is in epidemiology. I do a lot of work in public and private sector. Work with the Department of Labor. I work with private companies as well. My focus is in health and socioeconomic research on a community level, institutional level, and the firm level. I'm a little bit concerned on my initial readings of how the data is stratified in the Bonham report, and I don't find it particularly insightful. So one request I would like to make for everybody is if we could see the rationale and the methodology for the whole report, and if that's available, my apologies. But I'd like to see basically the protocol, look at the data points. I'm also slightly concerned from my understanding that a lot of this is based on a survey from 2019. The concern attached to that, if that concern is accurate, is that 2019 was pre-pandemic. There's been a massive demographic shift. I'm representative of that. My wife and I moved up here with our daughter, planning on her attending Woodstock School. That's one of the choices we made into purchasing in the area and purchasing nearby the school. I don't think I'm alone in that at all. So that's a concern. The second one is the current survey. I mean, I know a lot. I mean, one thing you say in epidemiology is there's never a survey or a questionnaire that's finished. They can always be better. So I'm not casting aspersions on the effort, but I'm not sure it's representative, and I'm wondering what the methodology is to make sure you get what's called a representative sample. And I'm also concerned about if that thing is due March 10th, you guys all have to take all that data and all these other considerations and then redistribute your findings and considerations to the community. And there's going to be a vote in April. I think that might be where some of the tension's coming from. And I think that's an understandable tension, is that the timeline simply does not allow for careful considerations to be made. And the final point I'd like to make, and I'd like to offer this as a service and consider there's quite a few other data scientists up here nowadays that could help, is going forward in case we have to adapt, in case our concerns are valid about the families moving in and those people not being counted with new kids coming forward, is that we can support methodological development to make sure we have excellent data acquisition and analysis tools at a comparatively very low cost to the school district, because I think we could put together a pretty strong volunteer committee. Thank you a lot. I know this is rough, and I am sure I had some false assumptions because I'm coming in late, but I would love those to be clarified, and I'll shoot an email summarizing all of that. But thanks for your work. I know this is hard.
Thank you, Mr. Glazer. I would encourage everyone to visit the website and look for our enrollment data. And using that enrollment data, you can verify the precipitous drop in enrollment that got us here in 2015 when this conversation first started. This is not a new conversation for us. This is a new conversation for perhaps for people who have more recently moved to the community, but this school board in some iteration or another has been having this conversation for almost a decade, more than a decade actually. We've been watching enrollment decline. Yes, we have had many people move to the area, however, not all of them are using our schools. And not all of them have children enrolled in the district. They may have bought homes here, they may have gone back to New York or wherever it was that they had been before they were here. But we are not seeing an enrollment improvement, let me put it that way. In fact, within the next 5 years, we will be under 1,000 students in this school. I appreciate, yeah, I mean, for sure we can continue to the conversation, and I would welcome your questions to come into the Board of Education. Please copy the board clerk and the superintendent. Ms. Shands?
First of all, I'd like to thank Superintendent McLaren and Assistant Superintendent Laffin for coming to the Woodstock PTA Sweetheart Breakfast. It's always great to have the admin here and at our events, and that was one of our busiest events yet. I know Scott is probably still stressing out about it. At the 221 board meeting, Trustee Taylor said about the absence of PTA members, quote, "If it means that much to people, whether for or against, then they should be in those seats taking part in the meetings." She said, quote, "We are talking to an empty auditorium." In her remarks, she also asked that the PTA members elect representatives to come to every single meeting and take part because big changes are happening in our district. I'm the PTA representative. No one else volunteered for this position because we don't get to participate in these meetings. This is your business meeting. Participation comes in the form of this: public be heard. That's it. The rules govern that. The colloquy that Trustee Sherry reads before every public be heard states that you cannot engage with us or answer our questions. I can assure you we are participating. We are participating in other ways. If I'm not able to make a meeting, I watch every meeting. I take notes. I report back to our respective PTAs. For example, the reason that this community knew about later start times and the discussion of consolidation back in September is because I was informing them, even though I wasn't here. We meet with the superintendent for PTA summits. We ask for board minutes and share them with our members. We volunteer for word cafes. We volunteer for shared decision-making committees. We share your Facebook posts, participate in and encourage our members, our community members to engage in your surveys. We talk to our local businesses. We are reading the reports and sharing the documents that we get, and we are constantly doing outreach. We are doing the work that you asked us to do. We don't need to physically be present at meetings to participate. We read the agenda when it's posted on Fridays before the meeting and let our members know what's coming up. You asked for a physical audience and you got an eye roll from your engaged stakeholders. Your comments were disappointing, out of touch, and quite frankly harmful to the trust that is in the process of being rebuilt between this board, this administration, and this community. We respond to the information that we are given. Now we have an ask for you. The PTAs would like to ask that you, the board, appoint someone other than Trustee Lynch, who has students in elementary school, to come to every event that the PTA hosts at every elementary school. We are asking you to participate on the elementary level. You are on this board because you were invested in the continuing success of this district. Elementary activities are the foundation. I'm sorry, I'm going to finish. I polled our PTA officers and asked them how many events board members have been to this year. And aside from Trustee Lynch as a parent and Trustee Sherry coming as a representative of provisions, the answer was overwhelmingly no. None. Zero. Many parents in this community are already grieving the loss of our beloved schools and feeling hopeless. If you want to understand where we're coming from, come experience or re-experience the love that Woodstock radiates, the joy that Phoenicia brings to the families, the courage that Bennett instills in our students. We are asking you to participate in our big changes.
Karen Chesley.
Hi, I wanted to talk to you tonight because I am one of the young families who moved here during the pandemic. And I think maybe where some of the disconnect is happening is that a lot of our kids are not in elementary school yet. We're looking at Woodstock Elementary as a future destination for our children who are now in nursery school and preschool, and our concern is that that school is not going to be available to them. And I'm sure that all of the parents that have moved to Phoenicia feel the same. So we're really here in support of keeping our local schools open. My daughter, Emma, is 2.5 years old. Max is here too, somewhere in the hallway. He's 2.5 months. So they're a little young right now, but we hope to see them here someday. The reality is that the pandemic changed the way that people work. It made it possible for me to move here. Even though my work is based in the city, I can work remotely, and I intend to keep my kids here. I know so many families in that same position. There is a WhatsApp group that has 41 parents in it, and that's just people I know. There's a number of people I'm certain that I don't know, and we have toddlers. We moved here in summer 2020, so we weren't counted in the 2020 census. You're not going to see us in the 2019 report. And I think where you really can see that increase that we're talking about is when you look at things like pediatricians' offices. I take my daughter to Children's Medical Group in Kingston. They've expanded their space, they've added new doctors, and I have to assume that they did that because there has been this increase in people coming to the community. If you look at things like Mountaintop's waiting list, right, for kids who are 18 months to 5 years, I think you will also see that that has massively expanded. And so there has to be a way to get better data to base our projections on what our needs will be when we look at elementary school students. Families like ours were drawn to this town because of the deep sense of community, which is based on shared values, things like education, arts and music, diversity and social justice. And that sense of community is really fostered by having local schools open. And it's also fostered by having more families like ours here and attracting them to the community with strong schools. The loss of a community school, and I'll just talk about Woodstock because that is our local school, we live right up the road, it would be devastating here. It would leave schools with one local choice, which is Woodstock Day. Wonderful school, but incredibly expensive. You're talking about $20,000 a year for one kid. For my family, that would be $40,000. That is just completely unavailable to so many families and would really limit the number of people that can move to this community. Already, I think there's a problem with Woodstock not serving its longtime residents, and it shouldn't be a town that exists solely to serve the needs of tourists and vacation homeowners. It should serve the local community. Thank you.
Jenna Skorupa.
Good evening, everybody. First off, thank you so much. I'm very sorry for what you have to deal with. I do not envy your position, but appreciate your time. I'm not going to repeat a lot of what my fellow new parents have said, but I do agree strongly that it seems the data is not fully representative, especially of our cohort of people, which are the kind of city folks who have moved up during the pandemic and intend to make this our home, primarily moved here for the school and the community. I myself, my wife and I moved here with our 2 kids, primarily because Woodstock is such a progressive, small town. It's so rare to be able to find that in a more rural setting, and it had great schools, so it was kind of felt like the holy grail for us. And so for us, I think it would be pretty devastating to lose that really tight-knit community school. So, we can talk about the numbers and, how you get the right projections for the future, but I think regardless of the numbers, what we lose if we kind of take the entire district and send them to one school when they're so young, is we lose that tight-knit community feel. And so that's kind of what I'll focus on, since everybody's kind of talked about the data. Again, I think everybody can kind of appreciate that coming from, you know, the communities that you do. You know, as you go out to bigger radiuses, you just kind of lose that tight-knit feel, that warm kind of community culture. And I think especially as our kids are so young, you know, that feels so important, especially today where, you know, the conversations that we even witnessed tonight feel so charged. And I think when you keep, you know, the schools, especially when they're so young, in that kind of smaller proximity, more kind of warmer community spirit, I think it just makes everybody feel safer. It makes everybody feel closer and more connected. And so I think that's extremely important, and, you know, something that I want to leave you all with tonight. Thank you very much.
Lori Osmond.
Whoops, hold on, hang on, don't start. Okay, hi, thank you. I'm Lori Osmond. I was a board member at Onteora for about 14 years, board officer. I've recently been appointed deputy town superintendent for the town of Woodstock, and I want to stress that I'm speaking as a private citizen. Closing schools without a clear, widely communicated plan of what to do with the buildings and what it will cost is irresponsible, particularly when it comes to village schools that are hubs and anchors for our communities. We've already seen how the district has handled school closure. We don't need 2 more empty buildings decaying in the middle of villages for years. Back in 2006, and the superintendent will remember this since she was the district business official then, the district was considering 3 reconfiguration options: keeping 3 elementaries open, closing both Woodstock and Phoenicia, or closing one of the 2. The board took a late-night, unannounced vote with no discussion at its prior meeting to change the middle school configuration. Pardon me. Back then, the administration denied that changing the middle school would have any bearing on which of the 3 configurations would be chosen, which was a lie. In reaction, I ran as part of a 4-person slate of parents that became the board majority in 2008, and the closure of Phoenicia and/or Woodstock was prevented. So fast forward to today. Looking at the comparison chart, all 3 reconfiguration options call for new construction and building modifications, but the costs are TBA. They claim that closing Woodstock and Phoenicia will save the most at $979,000 a year, but also say that it will require constructing 9 or 10 new classrooms and a gym at Bennett, as opposed to 3 to 5 classrooms at Phoenicia for the other options. That's more than double the amount of construction for keeping Bennett open. Back in 2006, KSQ Architects designed the 3 configuration options and estimated the cost of adding on to Bennett at $62 million. $62 million 17 years ago. What's that in 2023 dollars in construction materials? A few years ago, the superintendent told me and another board officer that she was in favor of closing Phoenicia and Woodstock and consolidating at Bennett. I doubt her position has changed, which means that unless the board goes against her final recommendation, this whole conversation may just be an exercise for appearance's sake. People are also saying that the superintendent may want to use Woodstock as an administrator's building miles away from the students. The Bachman report actually recommends using Bennett as an admin building. Why not use Bennett for that purpose without having to build 9 or 10 classrooms and a gym? Incidentally, as enrollment has declined, Onteora has increased its number of administrators who have 6-figure salaries and lifetime health care benefits paid for by taxpayers. You could save $979,000 a year by consolidating a handful of administrative positions and having retirees on district pensions contribute a minuscule amount to their health care premiums, just saying. In closing, there are no plans in place for closed buildings. There is no known cost for building construction and modification. There is a known socioeconomic cost to closing community schools, and rushing a vote on this on April 18th is disingenuous, misleading, and irresponsible. Thank you.
Is there anyone who did not sign up who would like to speak? Nope. Okay, moving on. Item 13.01, the board hereby approves item numbers 13.02 to 13.05. May I have a first, please? Trustee Bishop, second. Trustee Raimondo, questions or comments? Oh, Schedule U.
I reviewed the Schedule U and everything was in order.
Thank you, Trustee Bishop. Trustee Wallace was supposed to review the Schedule U, but because he's out of town, Trustee Bishop offered to do it for him. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Trustee Lynch? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Item 14.01, the board hereby approves item numbers 14.02 to 14.04. May I have first? Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee Bishop, questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Second reading and adoption of policy 5661, district health and wellness policy. May I have a first to adopt policy 5661? Trustee Armando, second. Trustee Bishop, questions or comments? No? All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. (15.02) second reading and adoption of policy 7251, prohibition on administration of traditional standardized tests. May I have a first, please? Trustee Taylor, second. Trustee Bishop, questions or comments? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Are there any other committee reports other than the ad hoc committee? Anybody want to report out? Communications committee, facilities? Nobody's, you got nothing? Trustee Lynch?
Just for transparency, our meeting hasn't happened since our last meeting, so we have nothing to report, but we will report next time around.
All right, thank you. Old business. Does the board have any old business? Trustee Taylor?
Is on? Yeah. It might be an RFI, but just if I can bring it up, how many families would have to move into the district or children be new to the district for it to justify or even us consider not closing anything or just leaving footprint as is?
So the question, as I understand it, is what would the enrollment numbers need to be in order to necessitate actually needing to leave buildings open? Is that what you're asking, Trustee Taylor? Is that for you? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Try and figure it out.
Okay. You want to do that as an RFI, Trustee Taylor? Okay. Any other old business? Trustee Lynch?
I'm just wondering if it would be welcome to support, I think, the why we're doing this long-term plan in a really comprehensive way, particularly for families that haven't been part of the conversation for the last 10 years, or whenever it started. I think it's important that we do that, and I guess my question is how best to do that? What would be the best way to do that? We talked a bit about, for example, efficiencies that and the costs, potentially even the percentage of budgets that go to just fixed costs with the facilities. Some of those bigger sort of foundational things that would be helpful, I think, to help just explain the why to members of the community, because we do have a great school. We do have a healthy budget, and we have all of us are very student-centric. So sometimes the question comes back to like, why are we doing this? Because it is hard. And I just wonder if together we could do better at explaining the why for all people.
Trustee Taylor.
I'm going to try and have this question make sense because it might not come out right. Is there a threshold where the state looks at a district and sees how they're functioning or like the footprint or anything, and God forbid has to step in and take any decision making away from us? Is there like any point in time where if I know we're financially stable, but if they look at declining enrollments, do they have any reason to do anything?
I would have to check just to ensure. I'm more familiar with the state stepping in for mismanagement.
Okay.
For, if a board mismanages or if there's fiscal mismanagement, but Assistant Superintendent Leclerc?
Well, the only thing I was going to add is that foundation aid is based on enrollment. So as our enrollment declines, as you'll notice, we do get very little state aid increases year to year. It's been that way forever. Ontiora has just been very lucky in that we have the reservoir that pays a lot of taxes to the school, does not send a single student to the school. So we are in a very unique situation. However, that doesn't mean that the district should take advantage of that. I mean, we have, for the number of students we have the largest per student cost in the county. So that's just kind of another thing.
I'm trying to think about Trustee Lynch's question because I agree with you, 100%. And I would say that as we consider, and we should talk about now, how we want to handle this, I would encourage members of the community to go back to our board goals discussion, where we did talk about how we came to set this goal and where it came from and why it is such an imperative for our community. There's a lot of information there about not just building efficiencies, but about classroom size and about how children learn best and about whether or not having children in classrooms with very small numbers of children are actually what is best for them. There's a lot of discussion about the number of students that we have with IEPs and in what way they learn best and how this district could be configured to ensure that all children are having access to the best education possible. So I think that we need to have the conversation again, and we should have it at our next board meeting in order to to try to work through some of this and make sure that the community really does understand why we set this as a board goal and why it's been a conversation for such a long time. It is not a new conversation, and it didn't come out of nowhere, but it is a conversation that predates many of our new community members. So let's bring everybody up to speed. Let's make sure that everybody understands what we're really working with and why we're in the position that we're in. I'd like to make sure that we can fully explain how we get our enrollment numbers, what projections we're using, where those numbers are coming from, how we are monitoring the situation. I know that in Woodstock, and I think that in other towns, there's a lot of work being done to manage for the STR issue. I did have someone from the town of Woodstock approach me and say, let's be very careful. Short-term rentals, sorry. There's a lot of work being done in all three towns, but I think, Woodstock is kind of pioneering some of this work. And that person did say to me, I just want to make sure the district is aware that if we do get a handle on this issue, that it could potentially increase enrollment. I don't know that there's a way to monitor or measure for that, but I would be remiss in not mentioning that they feel very strongly that there is a real possibility that they can solve some of the housing crisis here in Woodstock and bring back some affordable housing. I don't think it'll ever be like it was when I grew up here, but one can wish, and make sure that there is housing for families available. So there is a lot to parse out, and I've said it before, and I will continue to say it again. I understand the timeline that the ad hoc committee has set. I do not want to rush this. So, I want to make sure that we are having the conversations with the community that we need to be having, and our conversations need to happen in public. So, we all need to be comfortable doing that. Okay, so, let's try to get information out for our next meeting regarding the enrollment, transportation, and how we came to be. I think we already have a presentation that we did that brought us to this board goal, but let's bring that out for our next meeting and see if we can get that stuff on the agenda. Okay? Does anybody else have anything to add? Trustee Lynch?
Trustee Sherry, forgive me for maybe a newbie question, but is there precedent for a community-led group, a community-led advisory group to the board? I'm just curious if there's anything that's ever happened before, or does it require a board member and or an administrator? I've heard from other community members that they're willing and able to bring their own expertise to this, whether from communication standpoint or data scientists or others. And I'm just curious what's the precedent there for that? How would that work?
I'm not aware of a precedent that's been set before. I would encourage every member of the community to attend the Zoom on March 30th, to send their questions and comments via email. We absolutely read everything that we get. We respond to as many as we can in as timely a fashion as we can. There are, certainly resources available to the community to communicate with the board. And there, we have to remember that this is not a private school. That we are publicly funded. And because we're publicly funded, there is a limitation on what we can do with the community. There isn't, as far as I'm concerned, a way to bring in community members as potential experts outside of the committees that already exist. And please remember that we have community members on all of the committees that, the Shared Decision-Making Committee, the Facilities Committee, the Audit Committee. There are community members who exist already on those committees, and there's a reason for that. If we want to explore other ways of doing that, if you have something in mind, then send me an email and let's talk about it. I think we would have to consult with the attorneys because we are a public school district.
Thank you.
Superintendent McLaren?
I just wanted to also take a step back because I think the only trustee that was on the board when this goal originally was created is probably Trustee Story. So in 2018-19, the basis of the current goal was adopted by the then board, and it was to support the development of a long-term district-wide plan that strategically addresses educational goals, declining enrollment, facilities, community impact, budget, and cost-saving measures. Accomplish this through input from superintendent recommendations, board ad hoc committee, shared decision-making committee, and community outreach. And that has been a board goal. I believe it was suspended during COVID. But this has been something that we've been trying to move forward for a number of years.
Thank you, Superintendent McLaren. Yeah, I think that's part of what I was trying to say that you said much more effectively, but that our website, the Ontario website, houses the Board of Education information in a very specific place, and it is fairly easily accessible. I would really encourage people to go back pretty far, and that will give you a much broader picture of how we got here. and why we're here in the first place. Not one person at this table wants to close the school. Not one of us. When I agreed to run for the Board of Education, that was the last thing on my mind. This is not what I want to be doing. My kids went to Woodstock, Bennett, the high school. My daughter graduated in 2018. I have a son at the high school now and one who is being homeschooled. So, you know, that's not where I want to be, and I would say that that is the same for everyone at this table. So we got here for a reason. We will come back in 2 weeks and present as much information as we can effectively. And I would ask everybody to go back and take a look. Go back to 2016. Go back to 2015. Go back to when they closed West Hurley. You know, there's a very broad picture here that everyone needs to understand, because it will explain why we're having this conversation and how this came to be. And a big part of that is what Superintendent McLaren referenced. When was this goal made? When was Dr. Bachman engaged to do this report, and why? So I would ask everybody to do that work so that we can all have the same conversation, because we're here because we have to be, not because we want to be closing schools. That is, at least I will speak for myself, because that's what I'm allowed to do. It's the last thing I want to do. New business, anyone? Trustee Taylor?
I just wanted to clarify something I heard that I might very well have misheard. Have we tried to elect or one of us to be a representative to the PTA? Like, there's nobody, we didn't decide of anybody going to a meeting to represent the board or do anything like that, right?
No, Superintendent McLaren meets regularly with the PTAs, and in the past, that has been the way that was handled, and that's a fairly new, in the past few years, it's a fairly new thing that was developed, I want to say, Valerie might remember better, but in the last 2 or 3 years to ensure better communication. But we can certainly talk about 4 or 5, we can definitely talk about how we can best do this and potentially have someone available.
So
to
anybody
attend.
going to a meeting now would be going as a parent, not a member of the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the issue here is that, board members, we are only allowed to function as a board. We are not allowed to function as individual members representing the board. It's a complicated, kind of weird way that New York State has this set up. So when I speak, I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the board. When I go someplace, a basketball game, the Colonial Fair, or any place else, I'm the board president. I may be there for my business or my charity for the table, but I never cease to be the board president. However, I am only the board president when I'm sitting at this table. So it's really complicated, and it's a very strange way, and I know that Ms. Shands understands because she was a member of the board. So, I didn't understand until I was here. And we can thank New York State for that. So, it's something that we should talk more about. We can put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other new business? No? I would just say that I'm really excited that the Bel Air Bash is coming back. I think it's a terrific thing. One of the things that makes Ontiora so special is the way that our community cares for our children, and one of those ways is ensuring that they have a safe place to be after prom. Graduation, sorry. The last year that it was done was the year that my daughter graduated, and I had the pleasure of being at Bel Air until 5:30 in the morning, chaperoning. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because I got to be there the night that my daughter and her friends finished their high school careers. So it was a pretty magical thing, and if you hear about it in the community, they are absolutely looking for donations and for support, and I would just say, pay attention to that, and if there's a way that you can support the Bel Air Bash, please do so, because it's a pretty awesome thing that we do for the kids. And we have lots of events coming up at the elementary level. At Woodstock Bingo Night, April 12th. In April, there's a book fair, which if I remember correctly, is always done with the Golden Notebook, which is also one of the things that I love about Ontiora, is that we support our local bookseller, and they are fantastic. The Yard and Plant Sale, which is May 6th, which I had the pleasure of being at last year, which was also fantastic. May 12th is the Parents' Night Out. May 16th is the Teacher Appreciation Lunch, which is really cool. And the end of year picnic, June 16th for Woodstock. Bennett has Magic on St. Patrick's Day, Jazz in the Garden to benefit the Pearson Scholarship Fund, which is a fantastic place also that needs support. And Pearson is greatly missed at Bennett. The book fair in May, the carnival in June, and the 6th grade graduation moving up ceremony. And then at Phoenicia, there's a Western night on March 24th at 5:30, a variety show and an art show, both of which dates will be announced. And are all, I've been able to participate in pretty much all of them in some iteration or another of parenting, and it's a pretty cool thing. So please support our elementary schools and Bennett and the high school. We have lots of stuff coming up there, including Trustee Taylor's daughter in Chicago. Any RFIs, requests for information from the superintendent? You've got the... Okay. The next meeting is March 21st at the Bennett School. The parking there is really challenging, so anybody who wants to join us should probably plan to park out front. And that meeting will probably start at 6 or 6:30, depending on... Yeah. May I have a first to adjourn? Trustee Story, second. Trustee Lynch. Questions or comments? All in favor? Thank you.